If you ever wake up alone on an island where every house has its lights on, leave before sunset. Don't enter the church. Don't answer the voices near the beach. And if someone knocks on your cabin door after midnight, don't let them inside, because 3 years ago, my brother and I became stranded on an island that should have been abandoned decades earlier. And by morning, only one of us was still human. This is Tales of the Dark, and this is the story of Blackwater Island. My name is Adrian Hale. And in the summer of 2023, my older brother Lucas convinced me to join him on a fishing trip near the Atlantic coast. Lucas loved deep-sea fishing. I hated the ocean, but after weeks of begging, I finally agreed. The first day went fine. Clear skies, calm waves, nothing unusual. Then the fog arrived, not slowly. Instantly, one moment sunlight covered the water. The next moment everything vanished behind thick grey mist. The ocean became completely silent. No gulls, no wind, nothing. Even Lucas looked nervous. Our GPS stopped working first, then the radio. Then the engine died completely. The boat drifted silently through fog for nearly 2 hours before we finally saw land. An island, small, rocky, covered in pine trees, and sitting near the shoreline was an entire village. Lights glowed inside every house despite the storm clouds overhead. Relief flooded through me immediately. But Lucas didn't look relieved. He stared at the island silently. "What?" I asked. He pointed toward the harbor. Every boat tied to the docks looked ancient. Wooden fishing boats covered in rust and seaweed. Some looked over 100 years old, yet lanterns still burned beside them. We anchored near the shore just before sunset. The moment my feet touched the island, I felt something wrong. The ground felt strangely warm beneath the sand, like heat rising from underground. Then we saw the people, villagers slowly emerging from between the houses, watching us silently. There were at least 20 of them. Old men, women, children, every single one smiling, but not naturally. The smiles never changed. A tall elderly woman approached, first carrying an oil lantern. "You must stay the night," she said softly. Her voice sounded strangely hollow, like she hadn't spoken in years. Lucas tried asking where we were. The woman ignored the question completely. Instead, she said something that still haunts me. "The sea doesn't like visitors after dark." The villagers led us into one of the cabins near the center of town. Inside looked normal enough. Old furniture, dusty photographs, fireplace, but one detail immediately terrified me. Every clock inside the cabin had stopped at exactly 1:13 a.m. Lucas noticed too. Neither of us said anything. The villagers brought food shortly after sunset: fresh fish, bread, warm soup. But none of them ate with us. They only stood near the doorway watching silently while we ate. Then one little girl asked Lucas a question. "How long are you staying?" Lucas laughed nervously. "Just until morning." The girl stopped smiling instantly. Every villager inside the cabin looked at each other. Then slowly the smiles returned. That night I couldn't sleep. The island felt wrong, too quiet. Around midnight I heard footsteps outside the cabin, slow footsteps circling the house. Then whispering, dozens of voices whispering outside the walls. Lucas heard it too. "What are they saying?" he whispered. I listened carefully, and my blood turned cold. They were repeating our names over and over. Adrian, Lucas, Adrian, Lucas. Then came the knocking. 3 slow knocks on the front door. Lucas stood up immediately. I grabbed his arm hard. "Don't open it." The knocking continued. Then a woman's voice whispered softly from outside. "Please help me." The voice sounded terrified, human. Lucas hesitated, then the voice started crying. "I don't want to stay here anymore." My stomach dropped instantly, because I recognized the voice. It sounded exactly like our mother. Our mother had died 8 years earlier. Lucas went pale too. Then came another knock, and this time something scratched slowly across the front door, long fingernails dragging through wood. The lantern inside the cabin flickered violently. Then suddenly all the whispering stopped together. Complete silence flooded the island. Lucas slowly approached the window and immediately stumbled backward in horror. I looked outside. Every villager stood surrounding the cabin in darkness, perfectly still, watching us. their smiles stretched unnaturally wide beneath the moonlight, and standing among them was our mother, still smiling, still dead. Lucas stopped breathing. Our mother stood among the villagers beneath the moonlight, wearing the same white dress she'd been buried in 8 years earlier. Her skin looked pale grey, wet, like she'd just crawled out of the ocean. But the worst part was her eyes, completely black, no whites, no pupils, just endless darkness staring directly at us through the cabin window. Then she smiled wider, too wide, far wider than a human mouth should stretch. Lucas whispered one word: "Mom." The figure outside tilted its head slowly. Then every villager surrounding the cabin began speaking together, using her voice. "Let us inside." The cabin walls trembled softly. Something moved beneath the floorboards, scratching. The lantern flickered again while the whispering outside returned louder than before. Lucas backed away from the window, shaking violently. "That's not her." Then the front door handle slowly began turning. Once, twice, the old wood creaked inward slightly. The villagers outside remained perfectly still, still smiling, still watching. Then from somewhere far away across the island, a bell started ringing. Deep, heavy, ancient, the villagers instantly stopped moving. Every head slowly turned toward the church standing near the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The bell rang again, and suddenly all the villagers began walking toward it together, silent, orderly, like they were answering a call. Even the thing pretending to be our mother turned and disappeared into the darkness with them. Within seconds, the village became completely empty. Lucas grabbed my arm immediately. "We're leaving now." We rushed outside carrying flashlights toward the harbor. The air smelled rotten now, like dead fish mixed with seawater. Fog rolled through the village streets while the distant church bell continued echoing across the island. Then we reached the docks, and my heart nearly stopped. Our boat was gone. The ropes had been cleanly cut. Only dark ocean remained beneath thick fog. Lucas cursed violently. Then we heard movement behind us. Wet footsteps, slow, dragging across the wooden dock. We turned our flashlights toward the fog and saw people standing waist-deep in the black water surrounding the harbor. Dozens of them, human shapes floating silently beneath moonlight, their heads tilted unnaturally. Watching us, then one of them slowly stepped onto the dock. Its skin looked bloated and pale beneath dripping seawater. Seaweed hung from its arms, and as the flashlight illuminated its face, I realized it was one of the villagers, except now its mouth hung open impossibly wide, filled with rows of tiny black teeth. Lucas grabbed a flare gun from his backpack immediately. The creature took another step toward us, then another. Its joints cracked loudly as it moved, and from inside the ocean more shapes began climbing onto the docks. The villagers, all of them, no longer pretending to be human. Lucas fired the flare directly into the nearest creature's chest. The thing screamed, not like a person, like metal scraping underwater. Bright red fire exploded across its body. The others immediately stopped moving. Then every creature turned toward the church on the hill together. Listening, the bell had stopped ringing, and from somewhere inside the church, something enormous growled. The sound echoed across the entire island, deep enough to vibrate through the ground beneath our feet. The creatures instantly retreated into the fog, disappearing between houses and alleyways. Lucas stared toward the church, trembling. "What the hell is this place?" Then we heard screaming, human screaming, coming from inside the church. We looked toward the cliffs. Lights flickered through stained glass windows near the top of the hill. And for one horrifying second, I saw gigantic shadows moving inside the church. Far too large to belong to humans, Lucas made the worst decision possible. There could still be survivors. Before I could stop him, he started running uphill toward the church. I followed because I didn't want to be alone on that island. The closer we got, the worse the smell became. Rotting saltwater, dead things. The church itself looked ancient. Black stone walls covered in moss, broken statues standing outside beneath moonlight, and nailed above the entrance was an old wooden sign, BLACKWATR Reclamation Church. The doors stood slightly open. Warm yellow light flickered inside. And beneath it all we heard people singing softly. Lucas stepped inside first, then froze instantly. The church interior was packed with villagers kneeling beside wooden pews. Hundreds of candles illuminated their pale faces, all smiling upward toward the altar. At first the altar looked empty. Then something moved in the darkness behind it, a massive shape slowly rising upward, too large for the room, covered in dripping black water. The villagers began singing louder, and then the thing behind the altar opened its eyes, hundreds of them, all staring directly at us. Lucas whispered, "Oh my God!" The villagers stopped singing immediately. Then every single head inside the church slowly turned toward us together, and all of them smiled. The entire church went silent. Hundreds of pale villagers stared directly at us beneath flickering candlelight, while the massive thing behind the altar slowly unfolded upward from darkness. At first my brain couldn't understand what I was seeing. It looked almost human, but its body stretched far too tall for the church ceiling. Black seawater dripped constantly from its skin while dozens of arms twitched unnaturally along its sides. And across its face, hundreds of eyes blinked independently, some human, some completely black. The creature smiled slowly, and every villager inside the church smiled with it. Lucas grabbed my arm hard. "We need to run," but before we could move, the church doors slammed shut behind us. Boom, candles extinguished instantly. Darkness swallowed the room except for the creature's countless glowing eyes. Then it spoke, not with one voice, with hundreds, men, women, children, all speaking together from inside its body. "The sea brought you here." The villagers stood slowly from the pews, still smiling, still staring. Then the thing behind the altar moved forward, and the sound it made still appears in my nightmares, bones cracking, wet flesh dragging. Water pouring endlessly onto stone floors. Lucas raised the flare gun again with shaking hands. The creature tilted its head. Then suddenly all the villagers screamed together. The sound exploded through the church like shattered glass. Lucas fired instantly. The flare struck the creature directly in its chest. Fire erupted across dripping black skin. The monster shrieked violently, and every villager collapsed screaming beside the pews. The church descended into chaos. Candles overturned, wood splintered, people convulsed on the floor. Lucas grabbed me and we ran toward the side exit while the burning creature smashed through the altar behind us. The walls shook violently. Parts of the ceiling collapsed as the thing forced itself fully upright, and that's when I saw what it truly was: human bodies. Hundreds of them fused together beneath black seawater, faces twisted into its flesh, arms stretching outward from its torso, and buried near the center of the creature, I saw human skulls embedded beneath translucent skin. The villagers weren't worshipping it, they were part of it. We escaped through a side door moments before the church collapsed behind us. The creature's screams echoed across the island while black smoke rose into the night sky. The villagers staggered outside after us, but now their disguises had failed completely. Their skin hung loose and wet. Their jaws opened unnaturally wide, and seawater constantly poured from their mouths. Lucas and I ran blindly through fog-covered streets while the island trembled beneath our feet. Then suddenly, the ground split open behind the church, and something massive began rising from beneath the cliffs, not the creature. Something far bigger. The ocean itself started moving unnaturally around the island. Huge waves slammed against rocks despite no wind. The fog thickened instantly, and from somewhere deep beneath the sea came another sound, a gigantic horn echoing across the water. The villagers immediately stopped chasing us. Every single one turned toward the shoreline, terrified. Even the creature screaming inside the burning church seemed afraid now. Then the ocean near the harbor began glowing red. Shapes moved beneath the water, enormous shapes. Lucas grabbed my shoulder violently. Look, far offshore, something gigantic moved beneath the fog. At first I thought it was another island. Then it opened one massive glowing eye beneath the ocean. My entire body froze. The thing beneath the island church had not been the real monster. It had only been feeding it. The villagers suddenly began running toward the shoreline together. Not chasing us anymore, fleeing. And from the black ocean, something started climbing upward onto the island. A colossal shape covered in seaweed and human remains rising slowly from the water. The sight shattered my mind instantly. Lucas dragged me toward the cliffs while the entire island shook violently beneath us. Then came the screams, not from villagers, from the ocean itself. Thousands of voices crying beneath the waves. The huge creature emerging from the sea opened its mouth, and inside it, I saw hundreds of human faces screaming endlessly in darkness. The villagers dropped to their knees near the shore, worshipping it desperately, but the thing ignored them. It only stared at us. Lucas pulled out the final flare, then whispered, "If we stay here, we die." He fired the flare directly toward the old fuel storage tanks beside the harbor. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the island exploded. Fire erupted across the shoreline while massive fuel tanks detonated beside the docks. The blast knocked us violently onto the rocks. Flames spread through the village instantly. The creatures screamed. The church collapsed entirely. The fog burned orange beneath rising fire, and the gigantic thing emerging from the ocean slowly retreated back beneath the waves, almost like the fire hurt it. Lucas and I escaped using one of the old fishing boats drifting near shore. Neither of us spoke while rowing through thick fog away from Blackwater Island. Behind us, the island burned through the night. By sunrise, it was gone, completely gone. No smoke, no land, nothing, just empty ocean beneath grey skies. Authorities never found the island, no maps show it exists. And officially, Blackwater Island has never been recorded anywhere. But sometimes late at night, Lucas calls me terrified after hearing knocking outside his apartment door, 3 slow knocks. Then our mother's voice whispering softly from the hallway, "Please let me inside." And last winter he vanished. Police never found him, but 3 weeks ago I received a photograph in the mail with no return address. The picture showed Blackwater Island beneath heavy fog, villagers standing beside the church smiling toward the camera, and among them stood Lucas, smiling, eyes completely black. If you are brave enough to hear more nightmares, subscribe to Tales of the Dark. And if you have your own terrifying experience, leave it in the comments or send your story by email. Maybe your nightmare will become the next story told here.